Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the Yale School of Management MBA for Executives webinar, all about the areas of focus. My name is Maria Stutzmany-Marquez, and I serve as the Associate Director of Admissions, and I'm joined by my colleague and our fearless leader, Wendy Sung, who is our Assistant Dean for the program.
Welcome, everyone. We're delighted that you've joined us today.
Yeah. So we have kind of a lot to present. This is really the first time that we're offering an in-depth look at our areas of focus, which are a really distinct part of our curriculum. And we do have other webinars available, one in sustainability and in healthcare. Those are online, and they're moderated discussions with our faculty directors. So I would certainly take a look at those if you'd like to hear more about those areas from our faculty. And we also have an asset management student panel webinar that's also on our previously recorded website, where you can hear from our students directly. So thank you for joining us. We have 45 minutes together, and for those of you who are interested in applying, we know that round one is coming up quite quickly here. October 30th is the first deadline, so if you're finalizing some information or looking for more clarity on each of these focus areas, this is a great time to join, and we'll also share some information about the admissions process and our additional application deadlines towards the end. So, in the next 45 minutes, we hope to cover a few things with you. Our primary focus is to really take a look at each of the areas, so healthcare, sustainability, and asset management. We want to highlight our faculty and the Colloquium speaker series, as well as provide you with some insights into how intentional we are about crafting a cohort within each of these respective areas, with students who have demonstrated commitment in each of these different industries. So we're very excited to share, and without further ado, we'll kick off by sharing with you what we live and breathe here at Yale School of Management, which our mission is to educate leaders for business and society, and we take this very seriously.
Yes.
It is something that our students, our faculty, our alumni, our staff are really invested in. I think they feel a lot of passion for, and so many of their values that motivate them to do good, not only in their professional lives, but within their organizations, and how those organizations then impact the broader society. So it's something that we're very proud of here.
Absolutely, and our three focus areas really speak to that. It really, all three areas have such an impact on business and society. So
absolutely. And so we wanted to share a couple of photos with the broader Yale University here. This is one of the residential colleges. And as you may know, Yale is one of the oldest institutions. I think it's 1700s. And while it has such a legacy and history about it, we have, world-renowned artists and doctors and senators and presidents have come from here.
Nobel laureates.
Nobel laureates. Yeah, I feel like the list just goes on.
Yes, very impressive list.
Absolutely. So we're really happy, and we feel very proud of the college and the broader graduate programs. And while Yale is really quite old, the School of Management is very new. It was built in the late 70s, and really with a focus, again, on both the private and the public sector. And I believe we started with a master's in public and private management, which has then been translated into the MBA.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with that, we think we're quite innovative, and you have a unique mission, and with that comes a very innovative curriculum. So if you haven't heard more about the integrated curriculum, I would encourage you to watch a webinar with Deputy Dean David Bach, and our Director of Admissions, Joanne Legler, who goes into some depth about the integrated core curriculum and why that makes us very uniquely positioned to actually complete and reach our mission of educating leaders for business and society. This is just a photo as a symbol of the access to opportunities and knowledge and resources and oh my goodness, access to so much here. Not only as a student at the Yale School of Management do you have access to information here at the School of Management, but also beyond, across Yale and across the graduate programs. And our students quite often take the initiative to dive into those. So I'm going to pause here a little bit. This is something that I really love talking about. We feel very compelled, not only by our mission, but that mission really helps to align our community. So our students and our alumni are often here. We just had a women's leadership symposium where 4 of our alumni came to present on a panel. Our students are very engaged in the community and really help to enliven it.
Yeah, and our alums come back and TA in classes, so they're extremely involved. Yeah.
And so to put, I guess, a finer point, I wanted to introduce you to the class of 2021. They are still in their first semester.
Yes.
And there are 74 students. We typically and intentionally work towards creating a cohort that is very small, so 75 is usually where we're headed each year. And these are students coming from across the spectrum. So within healthcare, and as you'll see later, we have not only physicians, but we have people coming from biotech and biopharma and asset management, from hedge funds, from large institutional banks, and even those who are working in real estate and alternative portfolios. And then in sustainability, people who are coming with work in corporate social responsibility, people who are doing sustainable finance for their organizations, and those who are in consumer goods in the energy sector. So it's a pretty diverse group. And to give you just some quick information about who they are, they have about an average of 13 years of experience. 37% are women. Many come in with advanced degrees, whether they're engineers, doctors, nurses. There are about 13 different nationalities represented within our cohort, and the average age is about 37. So more coming. So this is really an opportunity to take a look at what the curriculum will kind of work towards in the 2 years. And so if you notice the integrated curriculum, the advanced management, and the leadership development, this is 75% of your overall learning. And this takes place not only in the first year, but also partially in the second year. As we're focused today, we're going to look at the 3 distinct areas that we focus on, along with the Colloquium speaker series. But I did want to mention that we have a pretty strong global component. That is the Global Network for Advanced Management, which is comprised of 30 top business schools throughout 28 different countries, and our students are required to travel to one of 14 different courses that are hosted at our partner schools, and that happens in June. And we're not going to go too deep into that today, but I just wanted to highlight that. It's a big part of the experience. And also we have a self-directed study, which is another opportunity to take courses either as electives or do an independent research project. But yeah, so what else would you say about our curriculum?
So I think you mentioned earlier there are 3 components that are sort of cohort-based, and everyone goes through that, the integrated core, the advanced management, and the leadership development. And that comprises about 75% of the curriculum. 25% of the curriculum is really focused in your focused area. And that's very intentional. We start off with the integrated core. And as you mentioned, Maria, it's very unique in that we view the core from a stakeholder's perspective rather than sort of functional areas. And business today is extremely complex. You're not just solving sort of a marketing issue or a finance issue. It really is, what is the customer looking for, and how do you address customer issues, or what do you do about the workforce? And so that's how we view the integrated core curriculum. While you're in the core, even though you're learning from the stakeholders' perspective, you're learning all of the basic foundational knowledge that you need as a future leader in management. And then you're able to take that knowledge that you learn and apply it to your area of focus and really dive deep in the healthcare area or sustainability or asset management. So you have those tools to be able to add on in those areas. And the Colloquium is really special, and I know we'll talk about this a little later, but it's really special because it brings to light not only sort of the practitioners in the industry, the leaders in the industry, and they come back and talk to our students. But there are also sort of new topics that may not, be built into the curriculum yet, that we can bring colloquium speakers in to talk about these new developments in the industry. So that's a really incredible component that runs throughout the program.
Yeah. Well, when I'm listening to you talk about it in that way, what I'm hearing is this idea that we can really provide some relevant information, that even though these segments within each of the different focus areas might be set, that there is ways to create nuance and further insight into these different components.
Yeah,
That's really
absolutely.
interesting. Thank you. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into healthcare. This is the photo here is the annual healthcare conference, which is the largest student-led healthcare conference. We host it every year. I believe it's in April. So if you do a quick Google search, you'll find the date, and certainly invite you to register for this. This conference is run by graduate students here at Yale SOM, the School of Public Health, School of Nursing, School of Medicine, and certainly some of our MBA students get involved as well. And I guess if I took a moment to just think about the healthcare focus area as a whole, this is really the founding focus area of the program. And I would be, I guess, remiss also if I didn't introduce our faculty director, Dr. Howard Foreman, who is pictured here in the top left. He is not only the faculty director here, he also is another founder of the MBA program. He has appointments at the School of Public Health, at the School of Medicine, at Yale School of Management, and also at Yale College, and he's a practicing radiologist, and he really is very passionate about this work, and is also involved with the Posen Commonwealth Fund Fellowship, which is in its second year. And so we're really lucky to have him and have that energy, because he really does care about his students and is able to connect them and work with them on specific projects. So we've since added in 2014 sustainability and asset management. So largely we were a program really focused in the healthcare space, and I think that our program has shown great strength in that area. So I'm going to dive in to talk a little bit more about the curriculum here in healthcare. Like you mentioned earlier, we can really add relevance and new insights through the colloquium speakers. We're also very flexible when it comes to adding new courses. I wouldn't say like they happen overnight, but I think along with thoughtful development and intentionality and what's relevant within the world and what the world needs within healthcare. So one example is the addition of population health and health equity. This is taught by Dr. Marcela Nunez-Smith, who is also, she holds many director roles here at Yale. She's the director of the Center for Equity Research. She's also the director for the Center on Engaging Research. She is, and I want to get this correct, so I'm going to read this out loud. She also works on issues of health equity and workforce development here, and is the new faculty director for the Posen Commonwealth Fund Fellowship. So she will be in her second year teaching this course at Yale SOM, and as you mentioned earlier, some of our students are now, some of our alums, Brad Richards, will also help with this course too. So it's interesting that that's able to happen so quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I also wanted to highlight Elijah Paintsel. He's top right. He teaches global health. He is also an MD here at Yale New Haven. He is an epidemiologist in microbial disease and also pediatric infectious disease. And he really works on a partnership with Yale and Ghana. And I guess a lot of his research is really related to malaria and identifying that through pregnancy, and then how that then impacts the mother-to-child transmission of HIV. So his research is really in depth. He's very well positioned to teach the global health. And so we're also very lucky to have him. And in healthcare operations, Eddie Pinker, who is also our deputy dean here at Yale School of Management, he also is a professor in operations research. He is really, I guess some of his research has included the optimization of hospital bed configurations as a way to kind of enhance effectiveness. So very much in that space, and I know that he works in operation spaces outside of healthcare too, but I mean, it's clearly, if you think about value-based care and the patient outcomes, that, what rooms people are in and how to best utilize them is always a big, especially at public hospitals.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have a couple of more, and I wanted to bring up that not only are professors, both lecturers and professors at the School of Management, they're obviously coming from across. We also have practitioners. So on the bottom right, Greg Licolai, he is teaching a course that's quite entrepreneurial in nature. He himself is an entrepreneur. And what he teaches is really about how, when ideas are generated, how do those sustain within organizations, and then how do those great ideas kind of transition into other healthcare institutions or other ideas. And he recently did a webinar on digital healthcare technology, where two of our alumni were also panelists, and it's just interesting to see some of the innovations and the creativity that's coming from that space as well.
And the growth of our alums after sort of taking some of these classes and springboarding into different areas, yeah.
Absolutely. And then last but not least, this is Professor Abelak. He teaches, he's a professor of economics here at the School of Management, and his work is really kind of at the intersection of public finance, behavioral econ, and industrial organization, as well as healthcare economics. So it's quite an impressive group. Again, our goal is to highlight the faculty and also some of the colloquia speakers. So, I think Howie does a great job of bringing in some tremendous people who will fill in some of those gaps and also have some experience in the policy sector. So Thomas Scully, who's now a general partner at Welsh, Carson, Anderson, and Stowe, was actually the administrator for Medicare and Medicaid from 2001 to 2004 under the office of George W. Bush. So not only bringing in some really important information about how policy works within our government, but now able to transition that into another practice.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I was just going to say that healthcare is such a complex industry now. So it's important for us to be able to educate leaders who will be making decisions about quality and access and cost and delivery, and all of these different issues require sort of not only understanding the entire value chain, including policy and funding and technology and operations and all of that. So being able to bring in colloquium speakers that can speak to these different parts is really key.
I'm curious to hear who's coming up.
Yeah, so actually we kicked off our colloquium speaker series for this year in September. And in the area of healthcare, we had Dr. Marianne Etibet, who is also a Yale SOM alumna. She is the lead and executive director for Mothers at Merck, or Merck for Mothers, sorry, and which is really focused on global maternal health issues. She talked about sort of what Merck is doing in that area to provide solutions for the global population. We had just 2 weeks ago, we had Dr. Michael Apkon, who is the CEO of Tufts Medical Center, to talk about sort of the challenges of leading and managing a large hospital. And we're also looking forward to several other speakers coming this year, including Dr. Bob Kocher. He is the partner of Venrock, which focuses on healthcare IT investments, and so that healthcare investments and new businesses are definitely increasing, and so understanding that process is important as some of our students are thinking about entrepreneurial ventures. So.
Yeah, it's interesting too. You hear a lot of talk about how much funding is going into healthcare right now from VCs or investors. So this is kind of the culmination of all of these parts.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
together.
And of course, I think Mandy Cohen is coming back this year to talk to the students as well about her work on the public side for the state of North Carolina.
Thank you for sharing. I'm excited. We sometimes get to sit in on those if
Yes.
we have time. So I wanted to share also highlight, I mentioned earlier kind of the intentionality that goes into the development of each cohort. And so these are a few profiles of our alumni, and I just wanted to share a little bit about their background. So Sandra Saldana Ortega, she was traveling at the time from Houston and then transitioned over to Boston and was then a New Haven, Connecticut resident because she became the Entrepreneurship Fellow, which is she was one of 5 that was chosen in her senior year to continue to produce and work on what she calls Alva Health, which is a wearable device that somehow is able to detect asymmetries in the body to better reduce the risk of stroke in patients who have already had a stroke. So it's I know that she's still working on it, but yeah, it's really nice to see kind of that innovation, that technology space come through, as well as Jen White. She was actually the one featured in Greg Lickley's alumni. It was an alumni panel on digital healthcare tech, and she works for an organization out in California that basically is trying to figure out transportation care within healthcare, and so that's a part of it. And then last but not least, Charles Powell, who just recently graduated. He is the CEO at Mount Sinai National Jewish Health Respiratory, and he also has a component of that organization that's also in Denver, Colorado. So he's a little bit in both areas. But he was really here to gain more leadership. I mean, he was already at a time in his career where he was leading a large number of people, and this was about kind of learning the business, like you mentioned earlier, some of those foundational components to really help him be the best CEO he could be. So, yeah, really great group. And I guess I wanted to ask you too, like, what have you heard about other alumni and what they've done after the program? I think that's a question in admissions that we get a lot, and I think it's understandable because people want to know like what happens then. Of course, these are all candidates who were in these roles as they were here. So what happens afterward? Where do people transition to?
Well, I would say, and this is true across all 3 focus areas, that as people embark on an MBA program, their careers, it doesn't stop. Their work, they continue with their work and they continue with their career progression. So I know people are asking about sort of what happens after the program, but it's also sort of what the MBA is able to add to what they're currently doing. And so there are a lot of promotions and wider span of control and growth for our students. And when they leave the program, there are also career transitions that occur. For example, Amanda Skinner, who is one of our healthcare alums, I believe she was a midwife when she was in the program, and she's now the CEO of Planned Parenthood for New England. We also have alums such as Wendy Davis, who was responsible for helping biotech startups with developing or acquiring their intellectual property as they move forward with their startup. But she caught the entrepreneurship bug herself and started a quite a successful company now to help with prenatal issues, identifying prenatal issues for individuals. So we have quite a few examples of people who've progressed in their careers, but also who've just changed careers completely because of what they learned in the program. And that happens while they're in the program as well as after the program.
Yeah, I feel like it's anybody who has like the idea of a growth mindset,
Yeah.
they're here and they feel passionate about their industry and they want to continue.
Absolutely.
Just kind of all the added information and resources kind of swoops them up and sends them wherever in whatever direction they
Yes.
wish to go. And so I wanted to take a brief moment to also recognize that I mentioned the Posen Commonwealth Fund Fellowship earlier when I was talking about Dr. Marcela Nunez-Smith and her course on population health, and now that she's the faculty director for this program. This is a new fellowship, and it is basically it is a scholarship, I would say, and a fellowship, scholarship to the program for those who have a demonstrated commitment and many years of experience in working on issues of health equity. So this is supporting those who are would be considered vulnerable populations or underserved areas, and really helping to change, move the needle in some of those cases. So we have 3 inaugural fellows for the class of 2021, and they're coming from backgrounds and expertise in sickle cell disease, in maternal health care, and then also in EMS, emergency medical services for large cities. And so quite a wonderful opportunity. I'm mentioning this now because we have only 2 rounds where we're accepting applications for this fellowship. They are October 30th and also January 30th. So for those of you who are interested and have not spoken with us, I would definitely encourage you to send in your resume and do a pre-assessment so that we can chat further about the fellowship. All right, so asset management. I wonder if any of you recognize this person. This is a former Secretary of the Treasury, Tim Geithner, under the Obama administration. We like this photo because oftentimes within the program, if we are hosting an elective or if we have a colloquium speaker, oftentimes there are people who are coming in with some significant background and expertise. And so this is a course that he taught on the global financial crisis, probably at a very appropriate time. And it leads to ask the question of, like, why did we decide to bring on asset management and sustainability when we were very strong in healthcare? So if I could ask you that.
Sure, and I think I alluded to this a little earlier as well. These are 2 areas that really have such a significant impact at the intersection of businesses and society. Asset management, the movement of funds, is such an important element of our world and impacts how we can be as a world, and how we can help the world, be a better place. And so asset management is definitely an area that was key in that. As is sustainability. Sustainability is growing in sort of the I think we were kind of on the forefront of sort of our focus on sustainability, because we need better leaders who understands that doing business is not just about the bottom line, but also about doing good as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think that what you'll see with the way the courses are designed are some really intentional theory and also practice. So many of these courses I'd say about 3 of these courses are really focused on kind of broader theory, and then the other 3 are going to be very, could be quant focused and quant specific in certain practices. So I want to share with you a little bit about the faculty, and I might give you a quick overview of the courses as well. So in the middle right, you will meet Will Getzman. He is our faculty director. He is also runs the International Center for Finance here at Yale School of Management, which also hosts an impact investing conference each year, which was actually inspired by and led by our MBA for executive students, which is really nice to see that continuing. And he is a Yale man through and through. He earned his undergrad here and his PhD as well, and has been teaching here. It's interesting because his research is really focused on alternative asset classes, and he has an interest in art. So
yeah.
One of our alums worked with him on a research project where he looked at art as an asset class, and specific to gender and some of their findings. So if you haven't read that one, I would encourage you to read the research there. And so he really has helped to coordinate a lot of these courses, and I know that there's he also helps, or at least the the Center for Finance also helps to curate some of the colloquium. And to move forward a little bit more with the professors, to the top right is Professor and former Dean Jeff Garten. And we hear from our students all the time how much they love this class.
Absolutely.
I think for people who are not in policy or the regulatory sector and thinking about, or maybe, are just thinking about how their function actually informs kind of the larger role of finance throughout the industry. This course talks about the disruptors in technology. 3 years ago, when I first started, I sat in on one of his classes and they were talking about blockchain and cryptocurrency. I think when it was almost at its peak. And so, people were really interested in learning about crowdsourcing and just the different ways in which disruptive technology and disruptive, innovations are changing that landscape. So it's a great course for that. And to the bottom right, this is Professor Song Ma. He teaches a course that he himself obviously is interested in entrepreneurial finance, also corporate finance and innovation economics. And this class is really meant to help identify and value opportunities, as well as kind of finding alternatives and figuring out like what other options are, and then kind of working and nurturing those opportunities to fruition. So I think he takes students through kind of a systematic way to think about how entrepreneurial finance actually applies. And then if we're looking to our bottom left, this is Professor Nick Barberas, and he teaches behavioral finance. And I really like this class as somebody who loves psychology. It's really a cross between cognitive psychology and behavioral finance, and really how those decisions are being made. And there's, the hypothesis or the argument is that the phenomenon that happens within finance isn't actually based on fully rational thinking all the time.
No, not at all.
Maybe it's a gut sense.
We're all irrational at times, right?
Absolutely. So it's a deep dive into when people are making decisions and kind of how they might get caught up and maybe being steered in a different way. So I bring that up because when I think about the theory and the practice of asset management, our goal here with this is to really support students in becoming the best stewards of capital.
Absolutely.
And so that's part of it. So the other two classes, Bruce Kahn teaches the financial market regulation. Oh, sorry, excuse me, that's John Macy. And he is an author of several books, and he is a professor of law at Yale. He teaches corporate law, corporate finance, and securities law. And then also top left in investment management, this is Stefano Giglio, and his research really includes topics of asset pricing, microecon, real estate, and he has a focus on hedging microeconomic risks and by using different financial instruments. So I think one of them was like climate risk and I forget what the other ones were, but anyway, so I would say that those two are probably a little bit more focused on the practice, but all still very good classes. And again, hoping that we're being great stewards of capital and making great decisions. So here's the Colloquium speaker series that we've had in the past. Of course, you might recognize David Swenson. He is the director and the CIO for the endowment, which is $29 billion.
Yes.
Yale's endowment. And part of that endowment, about 34%, actually goes to Yale operations. I did not know that. So he's here once a year to speak with our students, and of course Carla Harris, who is at Morgan Stanley, and she's a managing director as well. She's written several books about winning, Expect to Win, and she is responsible at Morgan Stanley for really creating client connectivity and engaging with the broader client base and partners. And then Adam Duncan, who is now the head of investment science at Cambridge & Associates. When he was here visiting, I think he was in a different position, and now he's really heading all of their research. And specifically, one thing that I read earlier was that it was looking at skill and anomaly detection, and also pairing that with predictive modeling and manager selection. So this is like very people-based,
Yes.
right? And so I think that as we're looking at predictive analytics now, as you mentioned earlier, the relevance of having somebody come and speak to our students about that is quite important. So
Absolutely.
who do we have upcoming?
Yeah, so we recently had Paula Volant. She is also a Yale SOM alumna, and she worked for David Swenson at the Yale Investment Office before she moved to Bowdoin College to be their chief investment officer. And she was here to speak because you might have seen her in the press quite a bit recently, but their endowment actually did better than all 8 of the Ivy League endowments this past year. Wow. So she we're very proud that she learned a lot from here and is able to really contribute and help a lot of students with what she's been able to do from the endowment fund to help fund scholarships and operations costs at Bowdoin. So we also have Mark Makepeace, who is the former FTSE Russell CEO, to come and speak this year to talk about sort of the importance of index market and leadership. Of course, I'm really excited to hear from Robert Shiller, who is as I'm sure everyone knows, is a Nobel laureate prize winner, who's also a professor of economics here. He has a new book out about the narrative of economics and how different narratives change the market. So we're really excited about it. And there's quite a few more people coming to speak in the Colloquium series, but we're really excited about these folks. Yeah.
And quite accessible too. When I think about how our students engage with colloquia speakers, like they're here, sometimes they will have a lunch pre-colloquia,
yeah.
Sometimes they're able to connect kind of outside of courses. So there is really that whole breadth of access and
building those connections,
yeah,
hearing from them, building those connections.
Yeah, thank you. Let's take a look at some of our alums. We have kind of, as we looked at healthcare, there were people coming from kind of the full value chain within that area. Same with asset management. So Jamila actually, when she started here, she was commuting from Atlanta and she was working with the SEC.
Yes.
Yeah. And so now she's at Ernst & Young as a partner, and she really works in the wealth management function of that group. And believe it or not, Chris Roberstadt actually did travel from Norway every other weekend. And he is a traditional portfolio manager and continues in that role back in Norway. And then Daniel Coutinho is coming from the government public sector at the World Bank, and he is continuing in that role as well. But I think the goal here is really to share with you kind of the diversity of backgrounds that we see. And so I guess, I feel like this might be a repetitive question, but I'm curious to hear specifically in asset management, what do you see from students who are in the program and even those who have moved, who have graduated?
Yeah, there's definitely, again, a movement within their organizations, but also to other organizations. I think, just Jamila with her story of completely transitioning from one industry to another, leveraging her experience and her education. But we also have people like Ellie Champion, who just graduated last year. She was one of the best and brightest for Poets and Quants last year. But she was in asset management, but started a business to help fund, she moved completely in a different direction to start a business. So very entrepreneurial, and you can read about her, and her background on Poets and Quants. And then we have people like Tiago, who moved from portfolio management into a treasury space. And so there's lots of different movements and different types of movements that can occur throughout the.
Yeah, and I love those stories because it really speaks to kind of like the passion that people have when they're here, and also kind of what they aspire to, even though it may not seem that they were headed in that direction. I think
Right.
once people get here and they're around peers of like, not necessarily all like-minded, but they're around people who are also dynamic and engaged and interested and kind of pushing forward in some way. And so these ideas pop up, and before you know it, they're off running their own businesses. Thank you. And so last but not least, we have sustainability. And so this is a photo of Kroon Hall, which is like LEED Platinum certified, probably the most sustainable within all of Yale.
Very beautiful
it's
too.
Gorgeous. And it is housed at the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, which is a partner for us. The Yale School of Management partners with the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies in an organization called the Center for Business and the Environment at Yale. It is co-directed by our faculty director in sustainability, Todd Court, who is featured in the top left of this slide, who teaches sustainability systems. And his research is at this intersection of corporate responsibility and sustainable finance. And he's really trying to figure out and help move capital in a way that is just responsible, not only at the sustainability level, but just even social, making sure that companies are really taking a look at how they're investing or how investors can then apply that funding to really good opportunities. So I think what you'll hear as we talk about sustainability and as we talk about the colloquy is kind of this intersection where investing in asset management and sustainability come into play.
Right.
That's not all, though. This sustainability is really about, how organizations are able to continue to improve, not only to decrease their impact on the environment and to reduce their use of natural resources, especially if they're consumer goods, but really to make sure that they are meeting some of the environmental, social, and government standards. So let's talk a little bit about the faculty. I mentioned Todd earlier. Below are two faculty, both at Yale. Marian Chertow, she is a professor of environment management at the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. She holds two director positions, one, the program of solid waste policy, and she's the director of Industrial Environment Management Program. She herself graduated from Yale School of Management with a master's in public and private management. I think she still holds that title. And she also has her PhD from the School of Forestry. And her partner in teaching corporate environmental management strategy is Professor Dan Etsy. He is a Yale Law School graduate and professor of environmental law and policy, and so they work together in this space. Right below that is Doug Kaiser, and he teaches on climate change. He's the deputy dean at the Yale Law School, and his focus is on environmental law, climate change, products liability, and risk regulation. And then upper right is Kerry Krasinski. He is a practitioner, and he wrote a book called Sustainable Investing, Revolutions in Theory and Practice. And he is a senior advisor to investment firms and is the co-founder and director of the Real Impact Tracker and Carbon Tracker Initiative. So he is very much embedded in thinking about how do we actually, what is the theory behind investing and what does it mean to be a sustainable investment steward? And then corporate finance and risk management and sustainability. This is actually quite quant focused. It's focused on the methods to integrate the use of ESG into core corporate finance. And so this is Bruce Kahn, and below is also Syed Alizamir. And his research is at the nexus of social responsibility and sustainability. And he focuses on operations. And so I think that when you take a look at all of these really esteemed faculty and thinking about their research background and where they're coming from, you can really get a sense that they have really invested their whole lives to ensuring that things are changing and for the better. And so I know that we're also pretty close to time, and we still have a couple of other slides to get through, so I'm kind of picking it up here. So to not go through each of these, but can you tell me a little bit about who will be joining us for the Colloquium in Sustainability?
Yes, well, we just had Paul Pozzotto. He's the founder and CEO of Give With, which is a social impact technology company that delivers sustainable sources of funding for the critical work of nonprofits. He was just here talking about that. We have Vince Stanley, who is the director of philosophy at Patagonia, to talk about Patagonia's approach to sustainability. And we'll also have Bruno Sarda, who is the president of CDP North America. And CDP is an organization that does work with companies and clients to create indices on environmental impacts of large companies. Wow. And so different areas of focus, and people talking about different parts of sustainability. Yeah.
Yeah. Please excuse us. We are moving through this quite quickly, and we hopefully can answer some questions if you're willing to stay on a little bit longer. Some of our alumni here just featured. So we have people coming from the transportation space, like Ilham Kortemanch, who's in Montreal, and he was actually with Tenaris before out of Nashville, but moved back to Montreal, Canada, where he's from. And he works this is the railway for Canada and their system. Manka, who is within oil and gas at Shell, and she was working out of the Boston office and was now, I guess, later commuting from Houston. And then, of course, Dwayne Edwards, who is also in transportation space, works on a subscription model. He's a product manager for Care by Volvo, which has just recently been launched. So you might be raising your hands now about what do I need to know, and you might have some questions about the admissions process. And certainly, if you feel really aligned, we're really excited to chat with you further. I'm going to highlight the admissions process here. We have first, when you submit your application, it's reviewed by a larger admissions committee, and then we will invite you, if your application is selected, we'll invite you to interview. Once you've had your interview day, then all of the data from interview day and your application is re-reviewed, and then we deliver a final decision. So this takes place in 3 different rounds. Of course, the first is October 30th, the second, January 30th, and the third is March 30th. So I would encourage you, if you are very close to completing an application for October 30th, and you're nervous that you might not have some of the components, or something's coming up that's posing a bit of an obstacle, reach out to us. We're happy to kind of work with you through that process and figure out what makes the most sense for your application timeline. But everything's online. It's very streamlined. It's quite deliberate and intentional in terms of the essay questions that we ask and some of the other information that we require of you. So next steps, as mentioned, if you have any questions or you'd like to see more information about the sustainability, asset management, or healthcare, I would certainly lead you to the previously recorded webinars, or just look further at some of the courses and the content that should be delivered on our website. Mm-hmm. And then if you're interested in joining us here on campus, I think our next information session on campus is going to be in January, and we have those listed. We do have additional webinars that are student-led that will be upcoming. And then, of course, if you'd like to meet with any of our admissions staff, we're happy to set up a call or meet with you one-to-one, and maybe in your region. So submit a pre-assessment online, and that will get us going. So thank you so much for being here. Wendy, thank you for all of the additions that you've made. I want to send some thanks out to our media services team, and Liz Fischio and David Daniel, who are assistant directors who have been working with us on the back end. I know that I mentioned that we would have Q&A, but if we're not able to get to, if you've submitted questions, we will follow up with you in emails or respond to your pre-assessment request. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.